Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
Lisa Wimberger is the founder of the Neurosculpting Institute and co-founder of the Neuropraxis app. She holds a master's degree in education, a foundation certificate in neuroleadership, and certificates in medical neuroscience, visual perception, the brain, and neurology. Lisa began her meditation practice at age 12, hit by lightning at age 15, and clinically flatlined on multiple occasions. Lisa uses her traumatic experience as a vehicle for transformation. She is the author of 7 books on neuroplasticity and stress management, including New Beliefs, New Brain, Free Yourself from Stress and Fear, and Neurosculpting, a whole brain approach to heal trauma, rewriting limiting beliefs, and finding wholeness. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. It's a delight to see you face to face.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about how you got into the work you do and what drives your passion for it.
Yeah, well, I think personal stress and trauma is definitely the mother of invention, I would say. And I had a traumatic experience when I was 15 that led to a seizure disorder. That was not epilepsy, and it was undiagnosed for many years, but I was having grand mal vasovagal seizures. So in layman's terms, I was a few times a year, my whole body would just shut down. My heart rate would plummet. In fact, oftentimes it stopped and I'd have to, get assistance restarting it or being resuscitated, so to speak. Brain activity would go away. I would go down like a ton of bricks, land on the ground in some crazy positions, usually coming out of these things, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to hold my urine or my bowels, unable to function. And then I would have to just either lay there for hours to recuperate, or I'd have to somehow crawl myself back to bed or a safer space. And these just went on for decades. And I was a meditator since I was a child. So I had what I thought was great emotional, spiritual, mental tools. And this was a thing, right? My body was doing. Well, lo and behold, in my 30s, I had one of these seizures in a doctor's exam, which was a gift because it hadn't really been witnessed by a medical professional. I was just usually me waking up on the floor and, people not knowing what to do. So he witnessed it. And what I actually woke up to was a needle of atropine poised at my heart. And he was about to inject me with atropine, which anyone in the medical profession knows is to resuscitate. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. And he looked at me and he said, "You flatlined. You had a grand mal seizure. You flatlined. We couldn't get your heart going. We couldn't get you breathing. We were about to inject you. What in the world is this? Has this happened before?" And then, this has happened since I was 15, and I didn't know I was having these seizures. I thought I was blacking out, but I didn't know what was occurring in those blackouts until finally this doctor actually witnessed one, and they tested me for epilepsy, and they, sent me to the ER for all the tests and things, and came out with the diagnosis of, you have vasovagal seizures, and these are induced by stress. And this was the pivotal moment. What do you mean I have seizures from stress? I'm a meditator. I have emotional tools. I have mental tools. I have spiritual tools. How could I possibly be short-circuiting from stress? And this was where all the light bulbs went off. And I started realizing I'm not healing anything. I'm bypassing something because I have a stress disorder. So my meditation practice is being poorly applied, user error. My mental tools are keeping me mental and not actually healing my body. There's a disconnect somewhere and I need to find it. led me to neuroscience, led me to understand my nervous system, led me to create a meditation slash mental rehearsal protocol that actually enabled me to entrain a new stress response and embed it in my nervous system so that I could automatically interrupt my seizures when they occurred. And I didn't know if this would work. I was desperate. My seizures were life-threatening at this point. And I used this protocol on myself. I pieced it together from what I was learning in medical neuroscience and neurobiology. And I was like, I have to figure this out. Western medicine is giving me no answers. I've used inquiry to investigate my inner psyche and stories since I was a kid, and that's not giving me answers. So something has to work here, and it has to be a bridge between mind and body. So this protocol I played with, and after like 7 months of using it to rehearse a new stress response and embed it in my nervous system, I had a seizure halo come, and in a fraction of a second, I thought I was going to go out. This script I had been rehearsing kicked in, and my body interrupted the seizure. And I broke through and didn't have a seizure. It was the first time that had ever happened. It was also the last seizure I ever had. Actually, I didn't have the one before it was the last seizure I ever had, because I had broken through. That was almost 17 years ago at this point. I've had seizure halos come every once in a while in the first few years after that, but my body just stopped it dead in its tracks. And I knew I have to teach this protocol to people in stress disorders, trauma disorders, people whose bodies are doing things they don't know how to control, people whose mental and emotional states are habituated to a very negative cycle. Like, this was a thing that sparked hope in me that if I could heal this, I could teach it to anyone, and they could redirect their own nervous systems. And that means redirecting emotions, perceptions, physical patterns, and even your spiritual relationship. Like, all of this is in the nervous system. And so I married this modality that I called neurosculpting. And 16 years ago, I just said, this is my mission on the planet, and I'm going to share it with as many people all over the world as possible before my body gives over to something else. That's pretty much the story of how it came to be and why I'm so passionate about it, because it saved my life. I can't not marry it, dedicate myself to it, and consecrate myself to it, because if I did that, I would be ignoring the very thing that enabled me to be here right now talking. So I have to dedicate myself to it, and that's what I do.
So how do people learn it? What's the structure and format? How long does it take?
Yeah, so the structure itself, the actual practice, is a 15-minute meditation template. People don't have to learn how to guide themselves. Like, you could just go to the website, the Neurosculpting website, and download a couple meditations, and the template's right there, and you just press play and it's me guiding you. And that's a practice. But that practice, unless you know how, what, and why, you can't really adapt that practice for different scenarios going forward. So that's where the education piece comes in. I'm a huge fan of empowering you to do your own work, so you don't need me. So yeah, sure, you can press play on one of the meditations I guide, but then you're still reliant on me guiding it. I want you to be able to do that for yourself. I want you to understand the how and the why and the structure. So we have online courses. They're self-paced. They're super robust. The beginner course gets you really using the tools, the template, but more importantly, I think, understanding how and why this works in the nervous system. So eventually you can adapt it to future stress scenarios that you never learned from me, but because you know the how and why, you're self-sufficient. It's like teaching a man to fish or handing him a fish, right? The recorded meditations, I'm handing you a fish, it's going to feed you. And I'm going to do that over and over again as long as you press play. But if you take the courses, I'm teaching you how to fish. You don't need me anymore. So that in a moment of real need, you have the internal resources to actually do this practice for yourself. So that's like the best way I feel like to get people self-sufficient. But the beautiful thing about the online courses is I'm still in a private group with all the students, so you still get me a lot to live answer your questions and help guide and direct you. And then we also have a network of certified practitioners all over the country and in Europe. For people who really want the one-on-one support, the relational, the co-regulation that happens through a relationship, that's quite possible for people if they want that. And so there's lots of different avenues to come to the work. And there's also a whole bunch of books, 7 books on neurosculpting out there right now that you can find on Amazon or, in local bookstores. But I'm a hands-on girl. I really want to give people practices, not theory. So the books are great entry point. And they do have scripts for meditations in there, but ultimately I just want people to leave feeling that I taught them to be self-sufficient, and I taught them to be efficient with their nervous system so that they can adapt more easily. And that's kind of how people can come to the work.
So what's the length of a course?
We try to make it bite-sized because neuroplasticity works off bite-sized chunks, and I'm a fan of efficiency. So the beginner course, I would say, is probably about 6 hours, and that includes video instruction and meditation library for homework and activities and worksheets. Then the intermediate course gets a little bit bigger. So that one is probably somewhere around 8 to 10 hours. And then the advanced course gets bigger. It's somewhere around, probably more like 16 hours or so that people can do at a self-paced, fit it into their busy lives. But all of the pieces of all of the courses are bite-sized chunks so that they're little doses of learning that give you time to integrate. So you can really take it at your own speed. I'm an online learning person. I also am an in-person learning person. I love learning. So for me, a 6-hour course, I'll probably do it in 6 to 8 hours and then metabolize it and then go back and redo it. So I get a deeper layer. That's how I like to learn. But some people like to space it out and I'm going to do just a little bit each week, and I'm going to take 6 weeks to do this course, just an hour a week. So it's really designed to meet you where you're at with your busy life.
So when you move from the initial to the intermediate to the advanced, are you talking about somebody at the advanced level who wants to go teach it to other people, or are you just talking about gaining better tools for yourself?
Better tools for the self. After someone completes the advanced, then they're eligible to enter our certification program. So you can consider them tools for yourself, and you can also consider them the prerequisites that get you eligible, but you're not able to facilitate and create a private practice around it until you're certified. The reason I have the coursework as preparation, prerequisites, is for this reason. And this is not to ding the yoga world, but this is the only example I have from lived experience. You don't have to ever have been on the mat practicing yoga to enter a yoga teacher training. And so therefore, not only are you learning in that training how to teach yoga, but you may be having your very first experience in your body of the practice. And so those two learning curves cannot possibly get you to the depth and mastery of teaching that you need to be at, because you're still trying to digest the practice itself. I am not a fan of churn and burn. Let's get people into our certification who have no experience using this modality in their bodies. I'm a fan of what Stephen Kotler calls embodied cognition. I want this to be authentic in your body, and I want you to have a real experience with this transformation before I would ever want you to try to, teach this out in the world, because you don't have an authentic platform to teach from. So therefore, for me, you have to use this first and know if you even like it before you jump into a certification and spend your time and your money and your energy and my time and my energy preparing you to teach something you know nothing about. So that's the rhyme and the reason. And what that does is it creates cohorts of people in certification who are coming for the right reasons. They're coming because they've experienced authenticity with this. And so that means right out of the gate, no matter what I teach them how to facilitate, they are going to facilitate better than someone who doesn't have any experience with this modality. And it really limits the pool, but it actually deepens the roots of the people coming into it. And that's more important to me.
Well, and I think back to the story you told of yourself initially, and the idea that you'd been meditating since you were 12 years old. And so you thought you already had the benefits you could get from meditation.
Right.
But there was a lived experience of a whole different level of depth and dimensionality that you were completely unaware of until you went back and looked at from another perspective.
Absolutely. I obviously meditation is a cornerstone of my life, but I view it as, because it's a practice, I view it as a tool. And you're not going to use the same tool for every situation. You're going to use specific tools that get the job done efficiently. And so here I was with a TM background, transcendental meditation training background, and lots of metaphysical training through the BPI program, the Berkeley Psychic Institute. And I had all of these tools, which were the right tools for my spiritual evolution, wrong tools for the body nervous system healing and repatterning. And I was using them as though they were a one size fits all. And I think a lot of people use meditation like this. They pick one kind of meditation and it's like, well, this is supposed to solve everything. And it doesn't. It really doesn't, because we have body needs, we have mental needs, emotional needs, and spiritual needs. And there isn't a one size fits all for that. At least I haven't found a one size fits all. So here I was ignoring my body and my nervous system for decades with my very robust spiritual, emotional meditation practice. And I had to bridge that gap, and I had to find a process that allowed me to understand how my inner thoughts and patterns were literally affecting my body, my heart, my lungs, my brain, my locomotion, my muscles, because that's where the short circuit was. It was in the bridge between mental and physical. And my other meditation tools were not helping me cross that bridge. So I would say I loved my meditation practice, but it was making me worse in that it was getting me further and further away from understanding my body and getting me more and more of the mindset that I'm not my body. Therefore, I don't have to address it. And in fact, in many meditation practices, embedded in the meditation is even the mantra, you are not your body. And yes, that's true.
At one level.
At one level. And well, why do I then live in one? And why am I not learning how to live comfortably, safely, fully in this container that I literally exist in? So to ignore the literal existence, that is the actual interface for the spirit, actually made me worse. It made me sick. I was dissociative. I was high pain threshold, so I ignored all my body symptoms to the point where I had to seize in order to say, snap out of it. I had to actually get to seizure before I would recognize I was dysregulated. That is dissociative at the highest level. And dissociation does not enable functionality from here down.
Right.
It enables functionality from here up, and that has strengths, right? Great problem solver. I'm a great observer. I'm such a keen observer in private practice that people feel as though I can psychically read them. And it's mostly because I'm observing them with my very dissociative, heady skill set. But am I feeling? No. Am I regulated? No. Am I able to recognize dysregulation at the micro level and adjust before it becomes a snowball effect? No, I was none of those things. I am now, but that's because I had to actually cross the bridge. And I could not use TM for that. I could not use my metaphysical training for that. I had to use neuroscience for that. And that was the game changer, was befriending and understanding the container and the interface I'm using to express my spiritual self. That's when healing happened for me, and that's what I want to offer people.
And my experience has been that a lot of times that is triggered by a trauma, right? So there is this, the infant, the baby is much more in touch with all of the flow from the physical, the mentally, emotional, et cetera. All that whole energy hasn't even been differentiated into this category and that category.
Correct.
And somewhere along the line, if I get traumatized, my survival response ends up doing something like you're talking about, dissociation or splitting, or relying on a strength to the exclusion of several other levels of skill that I have. And I go with my strongest, in your case, the intellectual capacity. And then,
absolutely.
So it's about a reintegration over time in books like Waking the Tiger and your neurosculpting that put people back in touch with, you may not be just your body, but you do have this as a vehicle. So it's got a lot of good information for you, and you can be its friend and it can be your friend if you learn to reconnect.
Absolutely. You mentioned Waking the Tiger. That book woke me up to, I have a body. Oh my goodness, I have a body and I don't even know what it needs. But I would say, as far as, just I want to define a little bit about how I think about trauma. Maybe this is interesting for you, whoever's listening to this, to think about it like this. Trauma doesn't have to be the big thing, right? It doesn't have to be what they call the capital T. It doesn't have to be the one event that was cataclysmic. It can be collected micro moments of unmanageable stress that compound over time and create a track, a pattern, a response mechanism that over time feels too big to manage. Some people that might say, well, I didn't have a trauma, I don't need these tools. But you have had more moments of unmanageable, unmitigated stress. So it doesn't have to be like the one life-changing traumatic event. We all have moments of micro stresses that are unmanageable. And those, because they're unmanageable, can stack up over time. So if we're experiencing unmanageable stress a little bit every day, over time, we've got an accumulation of a lot of unmanageable stress. And this can affect the nervous system, very similar to I had a traumatic incident. So I would say the incident is the capital T. The accumulation of unmanageable stress is the lowercase t. And so you don't need to think, well, this isn't for me because I haven't had a traumatic incident. We've all stored and accumulated unmanageable stress. and it will affect your nervous system and dysregulate it in a very similar way. So this is not just for the people who have had, the event happen in their childhood, or the car accident, or the extreme, anything. This is for every nervous system, because without mitigating our stress, it will accumulate. We're learning from it and adapting to it. So if we have lots and lots of unregulated, dysregulated stress moments that we don't resolve, then we're learning to have more dysregulated stress moments that we don't resolve. The nervous system is going to think these are not supposed to be resolved, and I'm just going to collect more and more. So we get to intervene and teach the nervous system adaptation in the moment so that it gets better at adapting in the moment for the rest of our lives. That's what we want. We want to teach it to get better at adaptation and regulation.
And as you talk about, when you have those lots of moments of overwhelm, or you can't regulate your emotions, or the stress is beyond what you can process completely, whatever you do to get through that becomes, oh, I survived. So now here's another pattern that gets strengthened, even if it's maladaptive in the long term.
Yes, absolutely. So if we don't course correct in an adaptive, regulated direction, and we process that stress response however best we can in the moment, which is generally not bringing us to regulation, that's going to be the go-to approach the next time.
Right.
Because the nervous system is ready to learn in all moments, and it's learning, oh, I ran away from that thing and that saved my life. I'll continue to run away. Or I dissociated. That worked. I'll just keep doing that. Or I self-harmed. That got rid of the pain for just a moment. I'll continue to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with the marrying of what you've learned about neuroscience and the physiology and the good side of what you got from your meditating, you've put together a system that you can teach people so that they can start to identify, I was going to say, these microdoses, these little events within the energy system that we call the body, and they can learn to choose a different response pattern. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. I love the term microdosing. It's generally associated with, the psychedelic world, but I want to associate it here with the concept of neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is this capacity that we can learn and adapt the brain and the nervous system in all moments. It's our gift. It's actually our superpower. But the way neuroplasticity works best is if we teach it in small, repeated, manageable chunks. That's how I define microdosing, right? So think about it like this. Think about it in terms of the gym. Everyone seems to be able to understand this particular idea. Let's say you had 4 hours a month allocated out of your time to go to the gym. Would you go one day a month and do a 4-hour workout and expect that to work? No. Is it better to go 1 hour a week on one day? I mean, it's a little better. Is it even better to go twice a week for 30 minutes? Definitely. Is it even better to do 3 times a week at 20 minutes? Somewhere between those last 2 options is optimal. That's microdosing, right? I think sometimes we're looking for the big revelation and we want the immersive experience. And we
it's
want
a pill.
Yeah, and the pill.
Right?
And we want to feel
the meditation in pill form. If I meditate for 8 hours, if I go to a 10-day silent retreat, then I'm all better.
Yes, but that's not sustainable.
Right.
In terms of neuroplasticity
Exactly.
law. Neuroplasticity says you want sustainable change. Don't look for the big changes. Create the microdosed, repeatable change. So this is the reason why neurosculpting meditations are about 15, 20 minutes. I don't want you to take a day on your weekend and clear your schedule and not interact with the world and do like a 4-hour practice. I don't want that. It's not efficient. It's not going to get you sustainable change. It's not repeatable very often. What is repeatable is a 15-minute window that you can do 2 to 3 times a week. Better yet, maybe even every day if you have 15 minutes, but even that can be unmanageable. That is the path to sustainable change, because that honors neuroplasticity rules, which the brain has. It speaks the language the nervous system is needing, which is efficiency and microdosing and repetition and focused attention. And it stacks and creates a foundation that becomes an adaptation state of being in the body. That is sustainable change. So because of that, are you going to have the revelation and the I'm completely transformed after one meditation? That's not my goal for you. You want to feel like your life is transformed in an unsustainable way? Go to a motivational seminar.
Right.
And that's not to say we don't need motivation. We do, but we need the practice to anchor it. And the practice is not always transformational at its face value. It's often doing the very necessary micro tweaks to position your nervous system for life-changing, sustainable transformation. And I'm in it for the long game. I'm not in it for a pill. I am not giving you a pill. I don't want you to have another pill. I don't even want you to think you're broken. Let's get rid of that idea that you're broken, because that's what leads us to wanting the pill. You are not broken. Your nervous system is adaptable. It's designed to be. Does it adapt well right now? Maybe not. But because it is designed for adaptation, all you have to do is start feeding it repeatable learning moments, and it will get better at adaptation. It's like the most magnificent AI that learns from itself, and you are the input. And so 15 minutes, honestly, through the neurosculpting lens is all you really need, repeated over time. And then you can layer that in with the magnificent motivational seminars and the retreats that take you out of your life and dive you deep. Those are things that can now take root in a ripe nervous system. But it's your nervous system that needs to be conditioned in order for those things to stick. And we often go to those first, and it's backwards.
Yeah, I was flashing on memories of back in the 70s and 80s. People would put on these seminars and even weekends where they would usher people into a peak emotional experience. And boy, the brain chemistry would get going. And I'm not talking about being on drugs. I'm just talking about sitting around, doing a meditation, being in a love exchange with somebody. And people would leave just vibrating with all these great feelings. And 2 days later, you'd see them in your daily life and they'd be crabbing about this or that or raging at somebody. And so
I have that lived experience as well. So, and you just summed it up. When I used to do cycle weekends with a group of monks that I was studying TM with. And we would go Friday through Sunday. And it was, Friday night we'd have a little like debrief lesson, and then we would meditate. And then we'd be in meditation all day Saturday. We'd break for meals, but it's from sunup to bedtime. We are in meditation, breaking for meals and not talking. And then Sunday, same thing. By Sunday night, we're so blissed out, so expanded, Now, it took me a while to get there, right? Friday night, I was aggravated from traffic in my week. Saturday, I was fighting my inner doubt, inner critic, like, this is really BS. I can't believe I'm spending my money and my time. Saturday afternoon, I'm hitting this, whoa, transformation. Saturday night, Sunday, I'm blissed out. I'm out of my body. My endorphins are through the roof. I am vibrating, as you said. And then Monday morning comes. And the high is there. And the moment I get into my actual day, it starts chipping away. By Tuesday, I'm worse. And here's why I'm worse. Because not only am I back to normal or baseline, which was what I was before going to the weekend,
The
but
stress
now
response.
now I'm in grief.
Right.
Because I can't hold on to this magic.
And of course, the thought comes up, there must be something wrong with me.
Absolutely. What is wrong with me? I'm spending one weekend a month and a lot of money to have these transcendental experiences. And I can't hold them past the weekend for more than 24 hours. And Tuesday through Friday is terrible. And maybe on the weekend, I leave my life again and I try to replicate it myself. And that's different because it's not a group experience. And now I got to wait a whole other month. And so what I was actually teaching myself was, in order to go to those spaces, you have to leave your life behind. Right. I was literally teaching myself that this is unmanageable. And so this is where then now my thoughts started going in the direction of, I'm going to live on the commune. I'm not even kidding. This particular group had a commune. And after many, many cycle weekends, the only way for me to feel that regulated, that expansive, that actual letdown process in my nervous system was for me to think I needed to go live with them. Right. And do this all day in a container where I didn't have to buy food and shop and think about electric bills, because my money would go into the pool of the commune and they would take care of it. That becomes this, oh my God, I'm actually considering what I felt like was, I'm going to join a cult. And it made perfect sense to me to actually think that, because my nervous system can't feel this good in regular life. And that was really problematic for me. It was dissociative, problematic, and now I'm separating from functionality. I can't function outside of a commune situation. Cult-ish.
But if you go there, you feel the bliss.
you go there and you feel the bliss, and you feel the bliss all the time until maybe you don't. And now where do you go for more bliss? You can't concentrate any deeper than you've already concentrated. So I had to really back up and choose to find a way to get my nervous system pragmatically to that state, self-induced, so that that magic was endogenous. I don't need a pill for that magic. I don't need a weekend for that magic. I don't need monks for that magic. It's here. It's right here. And I want to taste it every day and function and still be able to have a job and know that I can pay my electric bill and not have to shed my identity and take on a mythical identity that isn't allowing me to be in the world with the people I love. So for me, neuroplasticity is the highest form of transformation to me, based on my experience. It marries everything. It enables that magic experience to be channeled and funneled through the body that we are living in. Like it or not, you are in a body right now. Emotionally, maybe not. Spiritually, maybe not. Physically, if you're breathing, you have a body. If you're hearing me right now, you have one. And relative to the amount of time we've been here on this planet, 300,000 years for modern human, millions of years for humanoid species, you're here for maybe 85, maybe? And you're ignoring this? That makes no sense.
So the word repetition was coming up, right? You want it to be something that you can repeat. And what we know about skills and skill base is that in order to stay at a high level of skill, you might have muscle memory for it. Like what they say is, when you learn to ride a bike, you can always ride a bike going forward, right? The fact of the matter, though, is that if you haven't ridden a bike in 20 or 30 years when you start, you're not as proficient as you're going to be after 3 or 4 weeks of riding it again. So it's this idea that if I can learn to regulate my body and my nervous system and my emotions and my thoughts in this congruent flow, as a system, as a team, and then I get distracted from it. The story I like to tell people is I learned the EFT tapping, a very simple tapping technique to give yourself an acupressure treat for anything that bothers you. And I would be teaching it. And I spent a lot of years teaching it to people. I would teach it to anybody that came in a session. And it got to the point where if I had a whole bunch of new people within a week, or I was teaching the all-day class from 9 to 4, and then I'd have somebody come in a crisis and we'd do even more, then I would get to the point. This literally happened one night. I woke up and I was having a bad dream, and I woke up where I was tapping on my forehead. And in the middle of the dream, I thought to tap and scared myself because I was tapping.
Wow.
Now, on the other hand, if I go for 3 or 4 weeks, I don't have any new patients I'm teaching it to, I don't have a class coming up, I have a night where I have a bad dream and I wake up, I get up, I go to the bathroom, I get a drink of water, get back in bed, toss and turn for an hour, wake up the next morning and think, oh my gosh, why didn't I tap? Because it wasn't, if I'm not practicing it daily, if I'm not staying at that edge of performance for my, whether it's bike riding or golfing or whatever, or tapping or regulating, right? Staying aware of what this energy system is trying to teach me as I move through life, then I lose that edge. And so that's what I like about the idea of the 15 minutes, the 10 minutes, the learning the techniques that get repeated either every day or multiple times a day.
Yeah. Skills acquisition takes repetition forever, just like you said, right? Now, what you've habituated when you're younger will stay as a solid baseline much easier than what you try to habituate as an adult, which is why if you learn how to ride a bike as a kid, the baseline's still there and you can get back to baseline as an adult by just a few weeks of riding your bike. But then when you talk about a new skill, right, learning EFT as an adult, well, you can habituate that with enough repetition, but it's an active process where as children, we learn through passive habituation, right? It's just so much easier to learn as a kid because our brains, our neural networks haven't all allocated themselves to anything yet. And we're a little bit more, we're not fixed, right? But we're a little bit more allocated as adults. So it takes that active repetition. Change is totally possible. Skill acquisition is totally possible. It just demands that regular repetition. And so your example is perfect. It wasn't automated after a couple weeks of not using it, where it was automated with just a couple weeks of using it. And neural networks work off a use it, lose it principle because they're living dynamic networks. And those networks stay networked based on input because they're living and dynamic. So if we are constantly networking two networks, like the stress network and then the tapping network, and I'm doing them at the same time, I'm connecting them. Now, anytime stress comes up, I'm going to tap because I've connected them. And our dendrites, our little outreaches of those brain cells are really seeking to connect to each other. So that network, as we repeat that process, is thickening its volume and gray matter. It's making more and more connections to habituate this. But then we stop for a month and the brain just wants to be efficient. So if you stop using a brand new skill, the brain says, oh, why would I put energy into growing those connections when you're not using them. I'm going to put energy over here. And some of those dendritic connections are going to shrink back and prune themselves. And that network is going to get a little bit more loosely tied together, where before it was like this.
Right.
And so use it or lose it. If you repeat it, those networks stay dynamically robust and active, and current runs through them, and they fire their action potentials, and they get better at doing that. And then you take a break. They don't fire so much because you're using those resources elsewhere.
Repeat it to keep it.
Repeat it to keep it. And if you don't use it, you will lose it. Will you lose it 100%? Probably not if it's something you learned as a child. Will you lose it more if it's a skill you learned as an adult? Probably, but you can always get it back. And so this goes to some like really fun practices, fun lifestyle commitments I like to make that maybe you all would like to make. Every decade, the start of a new decade for me chronologically, I will set decade goals. And these goals are for skill acquisition. And I'll usually choose a physical one, a mental one, and maybe an emotional one. So for instance, last decade was, I'll give you this decade, handstands, which I still don't do yet. I'm working towards it. And learning multiple languages. So I've got 10 years, which is a really nice window to course correct if you're going in the wrong direction. You give yourself a year, you're going to fail, right? Because I'm not learning handstands in a year, and I'm definitely not picking up a third language in a year. So you have to give yourself enough time, and then you have to choose how to microdose those skills acquisitions every day or multiple times a week over those 10 years. And then what happens is your brain stays resilient, your prefrontal cortex stays excited with novelty and activation. You are learning and gaining skills. You are teaching your nervous system that it can continue to learn skills. And then by the end of the decade, you've accomplished things you never thought possible. And then next decade, pick 2 other things. And it's a way for you to play with neuroplasticity practices outside of stress regulation, right? Just fun neuroplasticity practices over enough time to actually keep yourself resilient and adaptable and engaged in life. It's very engaging when the brain starts learning. You feel alive.
Wonderful. Well, I realize I didn't watch the time well enough. I like to ask people, go back and review and something you want to add, but we're basically out of time here. So I just have to say thank you so much. I will be looking into the Neurosculpting Beginners Program for myself. It's neurosculpting.com,
Correct.
right? Neuro sculpting.com. And I greatly appreciate your being willing to share with us. Thank you so much.
Yes, it was great talking to you. And, I love how you engage in the conversation. So I really appreciated it today.
Please be blessed, and I will follow your work, and we'll talk to you again, maybe in about a year, see if we can get you back on the show.
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Wimberger is the founder of the Neurosculpting Institute and co-founder of the Neuropraxis app. She holds a master's degree in education, a foundation certificate in neuroleadership, and certificates in medical neuroscience, visual perception, the brain, and neurology. Lisa began her meditation practice at age 12, hit by lightning at age 15, and clinically flatlined on multiple occasions. Lisa uses her traumatic experience as a vehicle for transformation. She is the author of 7 books on neuroplasticity and stress management, including New Beliefs, New Brain, Free Yourself from Stress and Fear, and Neurosculpting, a whole brain approach to heal trauma, rewriting limiting beliefs, and finding wholeness. Lisa runs multiple companies and has over 60 international franchises. She still runs a private meditation coaching practice, teaching clients who suffer from emotional blocks, stress disorders, and self-imposed limitations. She is a keynote speaker and a faculty member of Kripalu Yoga and Meditation Center, and the Law Enforcement Survival Institute, Omega Institute, and 1440 Multiversity. Lisa teaches audiences ranging from corporate leaders to FBI and Secret Service. To date, Lisa has taught the tools of emotional regulation to thousands of law enforcement personnel and first responders across the country.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.